Welcome back. Today's story is not about how a battle was fought, but about why it unfolded the way it did. The field near Hastings did not announce itself as a place where history would turn. It was not a narrow pass designed to trap an army, nor a fortified city meant to withstand a siege, nor a dramatic landscape chosen for legend. It was simply rising ground, broad enough to hold a line, gentle enough to invite an advance, and high enough to give those standing on it a powerful sense of control. And in warfare, a sense of control is often more influential than reality. For the English army, this ground was not incidental. They had arrived first, surveyed the slope, and chosen the ridge with a clear understanding of what it offered. Elevation meant visibility. Visibility meant time, and time meant choice. Along the crest of the hill, they arranged themselves into a formation that was neither experimental nor improvised. The shield wall they formed had been tested repeatedly across northern Europe, in conflicts where endurance mattered more than speed and cohesion mattered more than daring. It was a formation designed not to win quickly, but to refuse to lose. From the hilltop, the Norman army below appeared constrained by more than strategy. Any assault would require moving uphill under pressure, maintaining formation while losing breath, and breaking a defensive line that had no incentive to move. Every step forward would cost energy. Every moment of contact would cost lives. And the defenders could see this clearly. This is an important detail because clarity breeds confidence. The English did not need speed. They did not need tactical creativity. They did not need to seize initiative. They needed patience. The early stages of the battle reinforced that belief. Along the crest, Norman infantry advanced in disciplined waves, supported by missile fire intended to soften the line before contact. But arrows lose much of their effectiveness against shields angled downward, and infantry loses momentum when forced to climb. The first assaults failed to break the wall. So did the next. The line held. No part of the English formation collapsed. No urgent correction was required. Men rotated positions, absorbed pressure, and closed ranks when gaps appeared. From above, the battlefield appeared to follow a familiar rhythm: advance, resistance, withdrawal. A rhythm that countless defenders before them had survived by doing one thing well: by not moving. And this is where the battle begins to take on its defining character. Because nothing seemed urgent. Nothing appeared out of control. There was no immediate reason to reconsider the plan. And when a plan appears to be working, the human mind begins to relax. This is not recklessness. It is not arrogance. It is familiarity. The defenders had seen this pattern before, and in other battles it had led to success. Which is precisely why Hastings felt ordinary, until it didn't. As the fighting continued, time began to stretch. The battle did not resolve itself quickly. It lingered. Hour after hour, the shield wall remained intact. And with each passing hour, confidence deepened. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that convinces people they understand what is happening. At this stage, no mistake had been made. No rule had been broken, no discipline had failed. But the conditions for failure were quietly forming, because success was beginning to feel routine. And routine in war is dangerous. It invites interpretation, it invites initiative. It invites people to believe they can improve on what is already working. That belief had not yet turned into action, but it was about to. In the next phase of the battle, the English would be faced with a moment that looked familiar and felt harmless. A moment that other armies had survived by doing nothing. At Hastings, that moment would be read differently. And that difference is where the story truly begins.
If we pause the story here and look outward, the situation unfolding at Hastings is not unique. Throughout medieval warfare, armies found themselves in this position again and again, holding higher ground, repelling repeated assaults, and watching an enemy begin to pull away. On paper, these moments look almost interchangeable, and yet most of them did not end the way Hastings did. In battles where defenders survived this phase intact, the reason was rarely brilliance or inspiration. It was repetition. The same rule applied again at the exact moment it was most tempting to abandon it. Hold the line. Do not pursue. Do not interpret movement as weakness. Commanders who had seen this pattern before understood something subtle. An enemy pulling back uphill is different from one pulling back downhill. The first is breaking contact. The second is buying time. And time, when used deliberately, is often more dangerous than aggression. In battles that ended in defensive success, leaders reinforced discipline at this exact moment. Orders were repeated, sometimes unnecessarily so. Men were reminded, loudly and often, that the position they held was already winning the fight for them. Nothing needed to be added to it. From the outside, this kind of decision looks passive. From within the formation, it is exhausting. Because restraint is not a single choice. It is a choice that must be reaffirmed every time something changes in front of you. Every movement below the hill forces the same question again. Do we move now, or do we trust what is already working? In most battles, that question was answered consistently. The line stayed where it was. The enemy regrouped, attacked again, and paid the same price as before. Eventually, momentum died on its own. At Hastings, however, the rhythm began to change. Not in the terrain, not in the numbers, but in how the situation was being read. But at Hastings, the retreat below the hill did not feel like delay. It felt unfinished. From the English position, the Norman movement downhill did not resemble the collapses they expected. There was no disorder, no visible panic. Just space opening where pressure had been. And space invites interpretation. To some, it looked like an opportunity to press the advantage. To others, it looked like a chance to prevent the enemy from reorganizing. Very few saw it as preparation. Because preparation is quiet, and quiet movements are easy to underestimate. This is where Hastings diverges from other battles in a crucial way. Instead of discipline tightening in response to uncertainty, initiative began to appear. Not as a coordinated decision, but as individual judgment. Men did not receive an order to advance. They inferred permission from silence. The first steps were small, measured, cautious. They did not look like disobedience. They looked like responsibility. And that is what made them dangerous. No one believed they were breaking formation. They believed they were extending it, closing distance, maintaining pressure, preventing a problem before it fully formed. This was not arrogance, it was concern. But concern, when acted on individually, has consequences in a formation built on shared discipline. As a few men stepped forward, others were forced to interpret that movement. Was it initiative approved by leadership? Was it a mistake? Was it something that now needed to be followed? Uncertainty entered the line. And uncertainty does not remain isolated. It spreads through posture, through spacing, through hesitation. Some held position, some leaned forward, some followed to avoid isolation. The line did not break, but it stopped being unified. This is the most dangerous condition an army can enter. Not collapse, but inconsistency. From a distance, the English position still looked strong. The shield wall existed. The hill was still theirs. But internally, the shared understanding of what everyone was doing had begun to fragment. Discipline was no longer a single rule. It had become a series of personal decisions. At Hastings, this shift happened quietly enough that it did not trigger immediate correction. There was no obvious disaster to respond to, no clear signal that something had gone wrong, only a sense that the situation was changing. And once that sense took hold, events began to move faster than clarity. The retreat below the hill slowed. Then it stopped. And in that pause, the conditions for collapse were fully in place. Nothing catastrophic had happened yet. No decisive blow had landed. No army had fled. But the battle had already crossed its point of balance. In the next phase, hesitation would become momentum.
and momentum would no longer belong to the defenders. This is where the trap closes.
The moment the retreat below the hills stopped, the balance of the battle shifted in a way that could no longer be corrected. For the Normans, this pause was intentional. It was the space they needed to reorganize, to realign units that had withdrawn under pressure, and to prepare a response that relied not on brute force, but on timing. For the English, watching from above, this pause was misread. It did not feel like preparation, it felt like hesitation. The shield wall on the ridge still existed, but it no longer functioned as a single organism. Men who had stepped forward earlier now found themselves further down the slope, separated by distance that had not existed before. Those behind them were forced to choose whether to maintain the original line or adjust to the new shape forming in front of them. And that choice was no longer shared. When the Norman counter-movement began, it did not resemble a desperate charge. Cavalry emerged from the flanks with control, not rushing blindly uphill, but targeting the areas where cohesion had thinned. Their objective was not the strongest part of the English line. It was the parts that had already begun to move. The first impact was localized. A cluster of men pressed from the side, cut off from the original shield wall, forced to turn inward instead of forward. From a distance, this looked like a minor disruption. From inside it, the situation felt entirely different. The sensation was not immediate panic, it was confusion, a realization that the ground beneath their feet no longer connected them to the rest of the army in the way it had moments before. Training assumes structure, orders assume direction. Both began to lose meaning at the same time. Those further back could not see clearly what was happening. They saw movement where stillness had been and heard noise where order had existed. Some interpreted this as pressure being absorbed, others read it as a breach forming, and interpretation now mattered more than reality. This is how collapse actually begins, not with a shout, not with a sudden break, but with people reacting to different versions of the same moment. A man steps back to regain footing, another sees that movement and adjusts, a third interprets both as retreat, and the line begins to dissolve without ever being broken. Orders were still given, but sound does not travel cleanly through armor, movement, and fear. Even when commands were heard, they competed with something stronger, self-preservation. At this stage, leadership becomes symbolic rather than functional. Presence alone cannot restore cohesion once shared purpose has fragmented. The death of individuals does not cause collapse, it confirms it. As pressure increased along the thinning sections of the line, movement downhill ceased to be tactical. It became escape. Groups that once fought shoulder to shoulder now moved independently. The battle was no longer being contested, it was being resolved. When the English commander fell, the effect was not immediate in a physical sense. The army had already lost cohesion. But his fall removed the last psychological anchor. What followed was no longer resistance. The ridge that had once protected the defenders now trapped them against their own momentum. The Normans pressed forward not with urgency, but with inevitability. Fear moved faster than steel, and momentum finished what hesitation had begun. From a historical distance, the Battle of Hastings is often summarized as a turning point, a change of rulers, a change of language, a change of power. But within the battle itself, the outcome was decided long before the final collapse. It was decided when discipline became negotiable. Other armies had faced the same moment and chosen restraint. At Hastings, individuals chose initiative instead. That choice did not feel reckless, it felt responsible. And that is the most enduring lesson of the battle. Defeat does not always come from weakness.
Sometimes it comes from reasonable decisions made at the wrong moment, from moving when staying still required more discipline.
That's the story. If you're listening to this right now, I hope the rest of your day goes smoothly. And whatever you're dealing with, I hope things work out in your favor. Take care, and I'll see you next time.